from the government, and I'm here to help.
Take a look, it's in a book.
Some members of the NDEs use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda.
Let's watch Figure It Out.
Welcome back, everybody. This is a great episode of We Figured It Out podcast. We are the end of days best friends, and I'm your boy, Michael.
And I'm Matt.
And today we have a guest, Devin, over here. And I've always been like a fan of the parallel realm or, weird math put together of the universe. Everything kind of follows a code to me. And, there's always a other side to it. And I came across Devin here and he experienced a near-death thing. So I was like, bro, you want to come talk to us? And luckily enough, we found some time together. So I want to introduce you and let you take it off, man.
Awesome. Well, first off, thank you for having me. I know we tried numerous times to meet up and things are kind of crazy. So I'm excited to be doing this.
Definitely.
I believe that you saw my story on an NDE group that I was on. And so yeah, it's really interesting the way it aligns with the times that we're in as well, because it actually started January 20th, 2017. That was when I had my near-death experience. And so basically, to give you some backstory, I was extremely sick. I was in and out of the hospital 22 times in 2 years. I had CT scans, MRIs, just you name it. They were going through it, trying to figure out things. My kidneys were shutting down. And so I finally got to a place where I was like, doctors were not working. I needed to expand, into other things. And so I kind of just started learning a little bit about things. I wanted to get more healthy, get off of pain meds, all that kind of stuff. So one day, which was January 20th, 2017, I came home. It was just a normal day, and I was standing in my kitchen, and all of a sudden I felt like everything was shutting down in my body. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but it is just a panic that goes off on everything. The only thing I knew what to do at that time was to pick up the phone, call 911. Told the person that everything was just shutting down. I didn't know what was going on. I thought, in a way, like it felt like poison, was running through your body. I just didn't know what was going on.
I've experienced like the black eyes, where you start like getting dark, but I ain't never
right
felt
before you
anything
pass out kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. So I basically had enough time to give a little information. I don't even remember everything that I had said before I collapsed. I remember my hand hitting the counter and then my phone falling, and then I fell. And so the next thing that I remember is getting up. So I'm getting up, I'm looking around, and everything is different. And before I even can really register that everything is different visually, everything feels different mentally. Like I felt like I was in a different time. So a lot of people will say that they feel like time stopped. I didn't feel like time stopped because I'm aware that if I'm breathing, if I'm even, observing anything, then clearly time has to exist. But it didn't feel like the same time. And at that time, I had actually turned to look over, and that's when I noticed that it was almost as if I was seeing energy that made up everything. So like being in a video game, at the point that they're building it in essence.
Yeah.
And so I started walking around. I walked into my living room. I think that what I was trying to do is try to find something that I actually could relate to. So I turned the corner of my living room and I looked at the TV. And prior to this moment, there was just a whole bunch of stuff that was on TV because it was the inauguration. So, people were talking, the news was all over. And when I looked at my TV, it was frozen. Nothing is moving whatsoever. And so at this point, the first thought that I actually had was some kind of catastrophic event, like a comet hit. Everybody was just, wiped out in one shot. Maybe it was a nuke. Like I had no idea. My brain was trying to register, everything that's going on. I knew I was outside of time. I knew that clearly things were frozen on TV. I just didn't know the answer. So at the time that I had thought in my head that this was everybody was the exact moment that I got an answer back that said, no, this is you. This is your life. This is your walk. And so at that point in time, because of the fact that there's an actual conversation that's going on, something actually answered, I started just, asking questions. I started, asking questions like,
How
where's
did
home?
it answer? Like in you or
So,
around you?
yeah, so it answered in me would be the best way of putting it. However, no part of it felt like me. Like I wouldn't have
Hmm.
had these answers, I had no idea what was going on.
It
So
wasn't
it
like an
very
Okay.
inner
much felt like a
voice.
guide. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So at that point I realized I died. That was just the the answer that I got straight up was that I had died. And so I expected hell. So I was raised in the church. I was taught all of those things. I wasn't the worst person, but I wasn't the best. And I'm very honest about that. A lot of people who, join Nine Vibes, they're, this guy is super enlightened, but I wasn't. I wasn't before this. So I kind of expected something, some kind of punishment, some kind of, damnation, anything. And there was nothing. There was just this pure understanding that everything was okay. So at the point that I'm standing there kind of just, looking around, and I remember looking outside and there was a rabbit that was outside on the grass, and the grass had already been brighter than anything I'd ever seen. I wish that I could explain to people what color looked like. It was the most vibrant, but like it didn't hurt my eyes in any way, shape, or form. So I look out and I see this rabbit and it jumped, it moved, and I could see the energy of the actual movement. I remember like watching that and being like, that is crazy.
What?
Um, yeah. And
Some
so
like some Donnie Darko right there, huh?
exactly,
Yeah.
it was intense. So when I understood that I had died and I understood that there was no punishment, no damnation, um, then I remember this moment where I thought before this experience, I was, like I said, I was agoraphobic, I was sick, I was damaged, I really didn't care about myself, didn't care about people in my life. And in that moment, there was no going through my life and having to understand it. There was instant filling the cup. That's it. It was just instantly where all of a sudden I felt loved. I felt cared about. I felt like everything was going to be okay. I felt whole. I felt healed. Like in that moment, it was just everything was gone. And so then, as I'm taking each step, as I'm walking through my living room, I'm receiving this information. But the best way of putting this is that it's kind of like if I were to give you 50 books in a different language. You have no idea what they say, but you know that you're receiving knowledge. And that's what was happening. I was just receiving all of this knowledge, but my brain could not make sense of anything that was going on. And so all I knew was that there was this light. No, I'm sorry. Before I got to that point, I look over and I actually saw my body on the ground. That was the moment then that I realized this can't be in my head. I'm seeing, my actual body. And I also saw my dog. So this is really cool because in this understanding, my dog shouldn't have heard me, but I remember calling my lab over to me because she was my best friend in the world. I'm agoraphobic, so I had no friends. I had nobody in my life. This was my ride or die. It's my best friend. So I called her over to me because I knew that whatever was coming towards me, there was this light that kept coming closer and closer and closer. And all I knew is I didn't want to do it alone. I wanted, her next to me. So I sat down in this chair and I called her over and she came over and she rested her head on my lap. And at this point, the light is getting closer and closer. And then right before it got there, there were these giant doors. And so right behind the door was the actual light. So that's how bright it was. It was behind doors, and yet I could feel it getting closer and closer and closer. So at that point, all I knew was I wanted to go towards this light. Everything in my cell, everything in my body was just like, you want this. So I closed my eyes, I took a deep breath, and in the moment I thought I was going to go to this light, I'm now back on the ground looking up at the EMTs who came through my door and are talking to me, and I can't hear anything. I'm deaf in my ear. I cannot hear anything that they're actually saying. I just know they're doing things to try to get me to wake up. So at that point, when I wake up, then they start, getting me to talk a little bit. Then suddenly I started getting hearing again. And that whole entire process kind of revealed. And the weirdest thing about it is that they actually stayed with me for 3 hours. So it took 3 hours to convince me that I wasn't dead because this was such a powerful, intense experience that my brain could not accept. anything.
The
And so
EMTs stayed 3 hours with you?
they stayed 3 hours.
Huh.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the guys actually went out and got a milkshake because at the point that I was finally, awake and everything like that, um, they had brought me some food because they thought that my blood sugar was low. It wasn't until later that we learned that I had a stroke and I bled into my brain. Um, and so at this point in time, my life changed. Everything about my life changed. And every day that went by, I would get downloads of information. So to give you an example, I got a download of the number 137649. I knew absolutely nothing what this meant. And so I basically then would go into a meditation and it would be like pulling those books I was talking about, like I gave you. It would pull one of those books and suddenly I could read it. I could understand it. So I understood that 137649 was just an alpha number in pi. So if you add it up, you end up with 30, and there's actually exactly 30 times 137649 is mentioned in pi, which of course breaks the understanding of pi because pi is supposed to be irrational. Turns out it's not as irrational as people think it is.
Hmm.
So I started receiving these downloads, and each one of them was a little bit more of these books that I had received. And so then I just started sharing.
That's incredible. Do they still, I mean, how long did the downloads happen for?
They're still happening.
Nice.
Everything that's happening right now was written in the books in terms of understanding things. Everything that's happened in the last few years, it's just one thing after another, and that's why I started Nine Vibes. People basically come to me, ask questions, and for whatever reason, I have the answer, and so
Yeah,
I just share it.
that's actually where you had made a comment on one of these drone groups that I was in, and it was
Mm.
more of what did you call them? A lions,
A-lines, yeah,
yeah, and instead of alien,
yep.
So what did you mean by that?
So
That's what I had
aliens
said.
are
I
actually
was interested. That's what I had commented. I'll listen.
Yeah, so aliens are advanced technology. That's what that is. It can be government. There's a lot of different areas that it can be, but it is just advanced technology. Aliens are actually humans that vibrated through the whole spectrum of humanity. See, because humanity is just a spectrum of light, right? So they are humans that has vibrated through the whole entire spectrum, therefore have the most compassion, the most understanding, and so they basically kind of guide, help, that kind of stuff, but they also don't get involved in political stuff. They don't get involved in small games because ultimately they understand that the end result is sealed. There's no point of really getting into that fear. So there is a difference between aliens and aliens.
To but they'll still observe. They're observing basically is what you're saying then.
Yes, the drones that you're actually seeing, you're going to start to see them shift here very soon. You're going to see people that are going to say things like, "Oh, wow, that looks more futuristic than a drone." And it's because of the fact that it's changing as we're changing. So it started as a drone so we can accept and understand what's actually there. And then it's going to start shifting so that we can start expanding and realizing that it's not just technology, that there's something greater that's actually watching what's going on right now. And right now is a very pivotal moment in history. It's a pressure point, and that's usually when they show up.
When you talk about, you were met with something that made you feel, when you died, and then
Mhm.
that's do do you think that what you saw there is because you were going to wake back up and they knew that?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think that I was actually going to cross over. I don't think anybody does. An NDE literally is someone who comes back. In fact, I was shown one of the things that when you're in your final moments, you actually don't experience any pain whatsoever. There's no point. It's only when you come back that suddenly that pain is now rushed. The memory is now there. And so we perceive our final moments as painful. But the reality is there's no pain whatsoever. So yeah.
Is what about a ghost?
Ghosts are awesome in the understanding of what they actually are, but not in the understanding of what we think. So the best way to kind of give the example of a ghost is to kind of think of like a hermit crab. So a hermit crab will actually leave the shell, and move on, but the shell remains. So any person has photons of light around them, just like a shell. And so whenever your soul leaves, whatever, it can end up being transcended or it can end up being through death. But whenever it leaves that body, the photons of light actually still hold that image of you. And so therefore, whenever somebody comes into that space with their energy, it's actually their energy that animates those photons. So that's why if you're a negative, that's why most of the stories that have to do with ghosts are usually revolved around something like grief. Someone died and they don't know how to deal with it, or divorce, somebody's losing something and doesn't know how to cope with it. It's your energy that actually animates those photons. And we actually know that because if you take DNA in a vacuum, and it will actually produce photons around the DNA, and you pull that DNA out of the vacuum, you still have the figurine of the DNA remaining there as basically light. So it's the same thing with us.
That's crazy. That would I asked that question, because you say you don't feel any of it, physically till you're back, and that's, you hear of like Hollywood likes to eccentricize, or however that word is. I guess I could be screwing that all the way up, but ghosts are always malevolent. Yeah, there you go. And
Right.
like not nice, and or you see like, what is that, 13 ghosts, it's real angry and
Right.
violent.
And that's
That's
because that's their energy, right?
hmm
Think about it. Who's the person who's trapping ghosts in a house and writing scribble all over it to make sure they're staying there? That's somebody who is scared. Somebody who
Yep.
doesn't understand anything. And so, yeah, it's your energy that animates those things.
That's wild.
Sense. Wow.
Now, to follow up real quick, when you leave, when you cross over, so we're talking about 3D and 4D, and you can ask questions about that,
And
but
is
we're
this
talking
all
about,
in a
yeah.
download, just to clarify, like did you catch this all through the download or at the time of when you were just experiencing all of that?
So it's kind of an in between. A lot of the information during my NDE was not clear. It would be like learning another language. I just didn't understand. As I've been talking to people, as I've been reading books, as I've been interacting with the world, all of a sudden the answer just fits into those places that no one else, could put an answer to. So for instance, a lot of people ask about the fact of, well, what if it's a positive experience, right? This is where Einstein kicked in. He basically wrote the equation that says E equals mc squared, which means that energy times mass, I'm sorry, energy equal to mass times the speed of light squared literally allows for the process to exist, the formula to exist. So if you love someone, if you've passed on and transitioned and you love someone, you can actually come back and touch them, give some kind of positive message or whatever happens to be. But the only way to do that is for you to actually be able to use this formula we're talking about. So in other words, if you wanted to haunt someone, it's not possible. You don't have enough energy to come from the
Yeah.
4D into the 3D.
How are we
Right.
going the speed of light?
They can haunt you, like they can make you haunt them is kind of the
Yeah.
way to, yeah, basically.
Exactly.
That's crazy. I've never thought about it that way, but I guess if your grief was so stricken and you held on to that for so long, your energy is that
Yeah,
aura, like you
don't
Manifests.
said.
mess with me, I'll make you haunt me.
Oh, that's I wanted to ask that about the aura and your NDE. Do you think that rabbit meant something? Like it was a
um
trigger to show you something?
I think that the rabbit, kind of the same as when I was looking at things, I think the point of it is to realize that nothing is what we think it is, that everything is made up of energy. I think that many people have tried to say that. And even when you read it in a book, you really don't grasp it unless you see it. And so to see it kind of solidified for me. And in fact, that's when I started teaching aerokinetics, was because I understood that you can absolutely move a pinwheel when you collaborate with the energy, which is aero, which is just wind. Collaborate with the wind, you'll be able to then move things. And I've been doing that for 3 years, just teaching people the power of basically what they have when they use collaboration.
I've always I remember being a child and I would sit in my room and try to like blank everything out and try to, oh, everything's an aura and an energy, I should be able to use the wind to move this piece of paper, always thinking I could be telekinetic and whatnot, but takes a whole
But you
lot more than
can,
that.
you absolutely can. The only difference between what I'm saying and what you're saying is you're trying to control it instead of collaborate
Okay.
with it, right? So that's where
Oh,
that ego work comes in, because everything wants to connect to you. Everything around you wants to connect to you. It's you that then it like are blocking it because you don't believe you can or whatever it happens to be. So when you actually, this is kind of an enlightenment thing. When you go through that journey, you clear up your signal. Therefore, you can
hmm
connect to anything. And that's how monks do it. That's how, any of them that have actually been able to do it. That's why
Like
I
some
teach my units
Avatar
how to do
stuff
it.
when they like plug themselves into the trees and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
You're more a part of it than, yeah,
Then
okay.
you
Yep.
understand, I guess. Did How long did it feel like you were dead? I feel like dead's
Um,
such a weird thing to say, but because you're not dead, you know.
right. Yeah, no, it felt like the whole entire experience in whole probably felt about 60 minutes, about an hour. Um, but I would say that it was probably closer to about 25 or so minutes, because the EMTs weren't far away. I had called 911 before I collapsed, so it wouldn't have taken them that long if they thought it was that serious.
Yeah.
And so, but it's hard to explain though, because again, time is very different. It's something that I've dove into. It's something that I'm actually working with colleges on locally, is to understand time in a different way, because time is not what we think it is. It is a three-part thing. It is an illusion, it is an absolute, and it is also a variable. In other words, it changes. We're the ones who decide what the year is. As you know, if you go throughout history, we also are the ones who are accepting. So whatever you believe time is, you'll live and die by that. It doesn't matter if you think you can only live to 100, you're not making it to 150. It doesn't, no matter what
Absolutely.
we get to. And then it's also an absolute. It does not change. 60 seconds is not arbitrary. 60 minutes is not arbitrary. All this stuff is designed into the 3D space.
So you believe in like quantum physics then, and like the string
Absolutely.
theory. What about like the multiverse and quantum mechanics and things like that?
So the multiverse, the only area that I see that they skewed to the left when they should have skewed to the right is that they think that every single time that you make a decision in your life, you create another multiverse. So then we get overwhelmed because we're constantly making decisions.
Yep.
But the reality is everybody knows this feeling. There's a moment in your life where you have a thought that you have to make a decision from either your heart or your mind. You have to pick one of those other. That's why it's called a why. One can go one way, one can go the other way. Every time in your life where you have to choose between your heart and your mind, you actually create another multiverse. And the reason is because you need to have the other side. It's just like if you're drawing a tree, right? So you start drawing a tree on the left-hand side, you do all the branches, you do everything, and then you stop at the center because you chose that side to go through. Therefore, the other side has to exist for you to be able to compare it and see that it's a full tree. The same exact thing. So there are not billions and billions of yous or multiverses or anything. There are probably, if I were to guess and to give the most, probably about nine that you actually made a decision that was split between your heart and your mind that needed to actually have another side to understand.
Um, the number nine's a crazy number. Every number can go into it, type of thing.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
could talk for hours about nine.
Have you seen the movie The Nines with Ryan Reynolds,
The nines with Ryan Reynolds.
where
I
he's
don't think so. Is that the one where the cartoons, the characters, the movie Nine?
no, he like lives in his house, but he notices like his parallel universes are starting to intersect,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah,
he's a
yeah, I've seen
nine.
that.
He's like a god avatar.
Yep,
That's cool
yep.
though to me. So yeah, I mean, I would like to hear you go into some of that number stuff in the universe, because I think everything's kind of like code written.
Oh, nine is the key. Nikola Tesla did an amazing job of saying that basically, if you want to know the magnificence, if you want to understand the universe, then basically study three, six, and nine. I mean, it's incredible how amazing that is. Because if you even take one through nine and you add it up, it's 45. Four plus five is nine, right? If you add up 36, if you add up one through eight, you actually get 36. Three plus six is nine. So whether you see nine or whether you don't see nine, it's always there in essence.
That's crazy.
Nine is connected to everything. The sun is 864,000 miles in diameter. That's a nine. The earth is 7,920 miles in diameter. That's a nine. The moon is 2,160 miles in diameter. That's a nine. The speed of light was agreed up until 1980, which NASA ended up adding 342 miles extra to the speed of light because the speed of light used to be 432 squared. 432 times 432, 186,624. That's a nine. And then they came along and they said, no, 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 we're pretty sure it's 186,282, which is only 342 miles difference. They're just tweaking just slightly to kind of unalign with these nines, because if you actually saw nine, you'd see the connection in almost everything.
And 342 is 347
Is
plus 2 is 9.
is a nine. Yeah. That's also
That,
the biggest reason
that's
why
crazy.
432 is the most profound number, that, and like as soon as you hear that number, there's something that resonates within you. The Egyptians used it, the
Right? The
Mayans used
frequency.
it. Yeah,
It's like the
exactly.
healing frequency or something, isn't it? They say you can
Yes.
ailments.
It's also what Earth was created with. So when you take that 432 times 432, you get that 186,624. That's all faster than the speed of light, which means you can create without actually seeing what you're creating. When you slow that down, then you have reality. Then you have things that are actually things that you can touch and interact with. So it started at that 432, which is why it is resonant through everything.
These the voice you were hearing, was there more than one?
There was only one.
Do
Yeah.
you think it was
What
like,
was it like
yeah.
with the voice? Like,
What
was it
was it
like
like?
was it like Morgan Freeman? Like, I mean,
That would be awesome. Um, so the voice was, let's see, have you ever
like you say it
seen,
was like within you, but like, I mean, I guess I hear my voice in a certain pitch, or something
right?
like that to let you know it was different than you.
Yeah, I like the Morgan Freeman. You could do Westworld and you have Ford. He was, he had that kind of voice kind of thing. In all honesty, the only thing I could really tell you in terms of what it was like is it was completely opposite of me. It was this vibration that was just opposite of everything that I was because I was just all over the place and it was very solid, very there's no mistaking what it was saying. When it said this is you listened. You just understood instantly
Hmm.
in that moment. So it's maybe the best way to put it is the vibration was so strong it put all the pieces together. But in terms of actually matching it to something, you could pick any character. There's
And
a,
match
a
it
movie
to
out
it.
there. Yeah, there's a movie called The Interview with God, and even the way he was talking to him is very, the kind of the same thing.
Okay.
Um, so when it said, it's you, this is you, do you think it was relaying across that, we each one of us has that? Or is there maybe, 10 of these that beings that you encountered and, they're divided amongst us type of thing?
So I think that to make it fair to basically what I teach is it doesn't matter if you call it God, doesn't matter if you call it the universe, doesn't matter if you call it law, doesn't matter what term you decide to use. Source, the Matrix love source. It's basically the thing that surpasses the largest container we can imagine. And so that's one of the reasons why when I'm working with people and they're struggling with this area, I tell them go out to the ocean and just talk to the ocean. You just need to believe in something bigger than yourself because then you can basically lower down your ego enough to actually hear, the communication. So it really it doesn't matter what you decide to say that it is, but it's one. That's the best way of putting it. It's one. So you have it. It's really just a matter on whether or not you can hear it.
Yeah. And what lower ego moment, I guess, than, dying? How vulnerable is that,
Yeah, there was nothing left at that point. I mean,
Absolutely. It's fascinating to me. So I got to ask personally, are you
yeah.
spiritual, anymore? Like, do you still Christ follow?
So that's actually really interesting. I started in the church. I started in a non-denominational Christianity church. My mom preached. My dad actually went to a synagogue. So I was was raised on both sides of this. I had read the Torah, I'd read the Kabbalah, I'd read the Zohar, I'd also read the Bible. And so I was actually in a place when I was stepping into my spirituality of kind of what everyone else is doing right now. I want nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with God, nothing to do with, that. But I kept Jesus in there. I kept, as we mostly do, Christ, Jesus, whatever you want to call it. And so what's really interesting is that as the years have gone by and I've been working with people, I've been going back to the Bible almost as if it's a code book. And I have been able to find things. I was able to find the chakras in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, whereas when I was taught the chakras were evil and they wouldn't be, in the Bible. I've been able to understand, we were talking about, I've been able to understand the crypto market and understand stock market from studying the Bible because we live cycles within cycles, and the Bible is just teaching you that understanding. So do I sit there and have the same exact view I had before where I got to save people and help people in terms of there's hell and damnation? Not even close. I have an extreme confidence of basically that's not even close to what it was supposed to be. It's really truly about your walk, your life, and your bond with whatever it is you decide to believe in. And the book is just code book to that understanding.
Do Then what about bad people, right?
Well, technically, first, most people say something like, why do good things happen to why do bad things happen to good people, in essence. But the
I know
reality
the
is bad
answer
things
to that
happen to
one.
everybody. Right, exactly. But more importantly, there are no bad people. There are only situations. And that's one of the things that I learned by realizing that there was no hell for me. I'm not saying that I was killing people or anything, but I was not a saint. If you pulled up any of my exes, it's not a good story of who I was prior to this moment.
Right.
I'm pretty sure some have even told me I should go there. So the idea that there was no, having to pay for those things, there was only understanding,
Hmm.
made me realize and look at the world and realize that everybody's just there. If you're blocked, then you just don't have understanding. And then when you have understanding, you wouldn't do the things that you're doing. And that includes the most horrific things that you see in the world.
That
They're
would
only done
be
because of circumstance.
that'd be one of
Um,
those heart and head decisions, and
right,
creating
exactly.
it. Okay. And
Yep.
maybe you are
And it's
punished
their
in the other
higher
one.
self that's drawing the other side. So it's their higher self that's going to reveal it to them when they're done making these decisions. The greatest part about the 3D is the fact that you get to make decisions. Love is absolutely pointless. Relationships are pointless if they're forced to be with you. The idea is that you're supposed to sit there and say, you can walk out the door, but I'm going to do the best I can to be the best person in this relationship so you don't,
Yep.
right? And so
Absolutely.
the only way to have free will is to allow everybody to have free will, and you don't demonstrate free will by taking it away. So the sad thing is that means that there's hurt and there's pain and there's suffering and there's lost people and there's horrific things that are actually happening. But it also teaches you the understanding that there's another side. And we don't look at that. We only look at the one side and then judge it. So there are
Hmm.
no bad people. There are only circumstances. It's one of the quotes that I constantly say, which is that nobody does anything inherently evil in the world given their view of the world at that time,
Yeah,
all that it is.
I agree with that. I mean, I
How old are
feel
you, by the way? Just like if that doesn't reveal too much about you.
No, no, no. I actually just turned 40, and
nice.
my NDE was when I was 33.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Um, oh man, what was I gonna say there? I forgot.
Sorry, dude.
No, 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 that's totally fine. Um, yeah, yep, can't even remember. It's gone. I don't even remember what you were saying before that.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, we were talking about my quote.
yes, yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so on like that spectrum of energy, right? Would you say like light or the like what did the rainbow look like or the aura or whatever you want to call it behind the rabbit?
Oh, behind
Was
the
it
rabbit.
yeah, was it showing you
Like heat
everything was like
waves or
yeah,
like
was it light or what was it showing you that everything is?
Yeah, that would be the best way of putting it. It was white light. So it wasn't, just any generic light. It was white light that was moving when the rabbit moved, almost like it was following it, as it was moving. But yeah, it was very much white.
Hmm. I wonder if that's like source energy, because like you say, E equals MC squared. So you'd need the speed of light. And
Right,
obviously we're not achieving that here alive on Earth or in
right.
this realm, I guess you would call it. The is that is there something, I guess what they were trying to say is beyond this realm, you're still you, but continuing on?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, and this is the part I think that spirituality is kind of missing the ball in this area. A lot of people are afraid that when you get to the 4D, that physicality doesn't exist. It does. So let me explain this. In this reality, we have a atom that is basically made up of electrons and protons and neutrons. Now, a neutron is neutral, so it doesn't matter in the game of this. But the proton is positive and then the electron is negative. Okay. That is why it is easier for you to get sick than it is for you to get healthy. That is why it is easier for you to be poor than it is for you to be wealthy. And that is why it is easier for you to be suffering than it is for you to be joyful. It is because of the fact that the electron is the thing that actually determines your reality. Okay. The electron is negative. So our mindsets are that it's negative. And if you go back to the Bible, that's why they gave the woman, Eve, the electron, is because the fact you had to pick one or the other. It was the men who wrote it. They went with positive for, Adam, negative for Eve. But the whole entire point is that that is what defines your reality. And we see that all the time. It is far easier to be negative than it is to be positive in this reality. When you get to the 4D, that process flips. Okay. So basically, the electron becomes positive and the proton becomes negative, which means all the things that you wanted to experience, health, wealth, joy, peace, happiness, euphoria, all those things are now physical in the 4D. Okay. So it's not that it's not physical and there's nothing you can just walk through, there's very much you. You exist, you are the totality, but now you are a completeness that you didn't have before. So an example of this would be by the time we are parents in our lives, we have already been through so much. We've been broken down, we've been hurt, we've been, lied to, and all these different things. So by the time you have a kid and you hold a kid for the first time, part of you is basically hugging that kid. Now imagine in the 4D where you're whole and complete, and now that's the first hug you get to have. It is a completely different reality, but it is not outside of science. And I think that's what Einstein was, I think a lot of scientists were trying to get us to understand this, that just because it happens here doesn't mean it just goes away in the 4D. And that's why Einstein was huge on you guys understanding, or when I say you guys, I mean humanity in general,
Right.
understanding that basically time and space are connected to each other. That's the 4D, that's the fourth dimension, time and space. It's just reversed.
Um, how into like woo woo conspiracy are you?
I've probably heard it all, but which way are you going?
um, so like if let I want to touch it back to like biblical and religion here
Okay.
for a second too. There are the Watchers
Yep.
in say like Enoch, and I think Enoch, might have been full of crap, but also maybe had something kind of like what you're saying too, where he knew the Watchers and there's this group of something. So how do you deal with like separating what you knew from the religion from what you're being downloaded, like telling yourself that this is beyond? I know you said call it whatever you want, but if Christ is still there, or if there's still a savior at the end of the day, or we're all modeled after that one thing as you once believed, where do you
Mhm.
draw that line?
So that's where nines really came in. Is I started Nine Vibes by teaching people to use nine as a cipher in everything. You use it, you'll be able to understand things. So including the Bible. When you're talking about Enoch and you're talking about Watchers, what you're really talking about is you're talking about people that were trying to write about a human that vibrated out of the human experience. Okay, so they were never going to come close because when you're talking about Watchers, they're making the mistake of thinking it has to do with Earth in general. Watchers are about the sun. If our sun goes away, right? This is one of the very first things you learn in the Matrix when he basically says, we went to war with AI. I don't know who did it first, but I know it was us who scorched the sun, right? It's that same understanding. The Watchers are responsible for making sure that the sun continues going because if the sun is out, we're done. There's nothing whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, understanding this philosophy will teach you that when you actually move past the sun, in essence, when you're space traveling, you're actually just on the other side of the sun. We are never going to be away from the sun because the sun is what actually keeps our atoms vibrating. It's what keeps everything vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
when you understand that the Watchers are responsible for making sure the sun never goes out, then you understand why the Watchers did some horrible things to humanity, because if humanity was going to cause something to affect the sun, they had to step in. And that's basically what the Watchers were. And in terms of the way that they write it biblically, they just had no comprehension of how to actually be able to explain that process. It
okay,
isn't until you read some other books that you start to put things together.
do
So
you do you believe the earth is fixed on its foundation, biblical cosmology?
whether it's round or flat.
Yeah, firmament.
This one cracks me up the most because I've seen people that just, I'll die on this hill, and I'm like, you haven't even been to space. How are you gonna know? You read a book, and that's great, but there's a lot of books out there. The understanding of Earth first and foremost is that it is a flat surface that has a dome on the top and on the bottom. Okay, so the understanding is it's very much round in that aspect, and that actually goes to, again, we'll go back to Einstein's, where he basically took a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and he applied space squared times uh, time squared equals then c squared, which is round or flat. If time is greater than space, then it's curved. If space is greater than time, then it collapses and it's flat. So based on what I know about the Fibonacci sequence and everything that I've worked on with it, I know that time is greater than space, therefore it's more curved. Whether or
Hmm.
not it's a perfect ball or anything, that's just up for debate, and that's just playing games. But the reality is that it is more flat in terms of what we're living on than what they basically tell you.
It's wild to think that it almost makes me like jealous, that I don't have a download. And can you get answers to something that you want through it?
I can,
Or
yeah.
are you just waiting for it
Like
to come to you?
like Tesla's energy thing, like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so far I've been working with students for 3 years actively. I've been on Facebook on all different platforms, and I have yet to run into a question I couldn't answer. It's just whatever was in those books, and I don't know how to explain it except for the fact that I have the books. And so whenever I'm asked a question, instantly my brain goes, I have that answer. And it's just, pulling it up at that point. I have done a lot of really, really awesome stuff with Nikola Tesla's work. Stuff that, again, I'm working locally with some colleges. It's one of the reasons why I'm not working with students after this year, is just because of the fact that I'm shifting to tangibly, doing different things. And I'll give you an example real quick. If you've ever heard of the 3-4-5 triangle, Pythagorean's 3-4-5 triangle, it's where the a squared plus b squared equals c squared comes from.
Okay.
So if you take the Fibonacci sequence, and the Fibonacci sequence grows as large as it can. In fact, the idea is that the Fibonacci sequence started in the very beginning of time. And yet that's the clock that's going. And the reason we know that, or some people know that, is because the Fibonacci sequence has a hidden key. It actually repeats every 60 numbers with the last digit. So it could be, by the 216th Fibonacci number, you're into a quadrillion number. That's how massive it is. Just 216 jumps into it. And yet, if you take the last digit, it repeats every 60 digits. Every single 60 digits, it creates this pattern. And so if you take that 60 digits and you apply it to a 3-4-5 triangle, you have 15 numbers on the A side, 20 numbers on the B side, and you have 25 numbers on the C side. Well, if you add up those numbers, you'll end up with 56 squared. The bottom, you have 105 squared, which is perfectly equal to C squared, which is 119 squared. So those two things should have nothing to do with each other in any way, shape, or form. Fibonacci and a Pythagorean's triangle, nothing to do with each other. And yet there it is, perfectly aligned throughout history. A lot of people don't know that Ezekiel and Pythagoras lived at the exact same time. So when you're reading the
Really?
Bible and you're thinking they're dumb, you're missing the point. They were exceptionally intelligent.
Yeah. Um, I want to touch on something here real quick because everything you
Yeah,
just brought up kind of aligns. Right now I'm looking into, like, there's a lot of 2025 and throughout history and just all
right.
kinds of things of maybe this is the end, right? Sears, Mayan calendar, if you structure the Baktun to the correct Gregorian, they say things like this. But
Right.
anyway, um 2025 is 9, right?
Yes.
So you've been talking about that. It clicked in my head. I was like, okay, 9. And then you say Fibonacci, and maybe it's the timeline from the beginning would, and 9, falling into that and then repeating every 60. And then you said 216 on it, which was 9.
Right.
And so it all kind of just was clicking in my head. And I was like, that's something crazy too. I could look into the Fibonacci and is that timeline ending in 2025? So,
So it's not actually ending in 2025, but in terms of understanding cycles. So have you ever heard of the precession of the equinox?
no, just the equinox.
No, that's okay. So the precession of the equinox is basically the Earth rotating on an axis through all 12 zodiacs. Okay. So I have actually created a calendar because I kind of figured this part out. So we are actually meant to have 432 days in a year. Okay. There are things that we have done that we have adjusted and we have changed that have actually shifted this off a little bit. And in the Bible, they believed in 360. They believed in 360 because it also fits perfectly with the precession of the equinox. But if you take 432 and you times that times 5, you get 2,160. Remember, I told you the moon is exactly 2,160 miles in diameter.
Yeah.
If you take 2,160 and you times it times 12, which is the 12 zodiacs, you get exactly 25,920. That's considered the totality of the precession of the equinox. Okay.
Okay.
All of those are nines. 432 times 5, 2160 times 12 ends up being 25,920. It's all nines. But to add on to your Fibonacci, the 216th Fibonacci number is also a 9. It also, if you add it up, ends up being exactly 216 as a total. So there are many ways that you can find nines. You can find them with the last digit. You can find them with the first digit, which is a pattern that is called Benford's Law. If you haven't heard of Benford's Law, it's been used in your life since you started doing taxes. It's how Enron got busted. It's a very simple law. You just take any amount of data, you take the first digit. It's only going to be 1 through 9, and there should be a perfect amount of ones, perfect amount of twos, threes, four, fives. If it doesn't, someone lied. That's all that it tells you. That's how they got busted. All of that has to do with 9. You never go to 10 because 10 would just be 1 plus 0, which is 1 all over again. So if you take the Fibonacci sequence, there's another pattern that's hidden. If you take the Fibonacci sequence and instead of taking the last digit, you add them up basically to get a digital root, you end up with 12 numbers, which is going to end up being 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And then you end up having 4, then you have 3, 7, then you have 1, then you have 8, then you have 9. And if you take the next 12 and you align them on top of each other, they're perfect nines. If you were to add them up, 1 plus 8 is 9, 7 plus 2 is 9, 6 and 3 is 9, 5 and 4 is 9, all the way down. So it repeats that indefinitely as well.
So was Terrence Howard completely wrong then? I mean, he's trying
Terrence
to say,
Howard,
yeah, the 1 times 1 is 2.
right.
Yeah.
So there are some things that he did that are absolutely awesome. The fact that he was able to take the flower of life and find a hidden shape inside the flower of life is epic. The fact that he wanted to take 1 times 1 equals 2 just throws everything completely out. That is not, and I understand why he was trying to, because 2 is a very difficult number in math. Nothing makes sense. Like when you're looking at primes, it always starts after 2. And so he was trying to kind of make sense of something while also being very angry at people. He was angry at the government. He was angry at Hollywood. He was angry at his, exes who didn't believe him. Like you could feel that energy if you watch that.
Yeah, he was trying to prove something to somebody instead of just,
Yeah.
being
And
okay with
what was interesting about that is if you take that shape that he actually did and he created the drones, out of this shape, the part that they don't tell you is that in music, there is this perfect flow called temperament. So you go from 72 to 144, 144 to 288. It just follows this perfect flow, right? If you were to change that just slightly to let's say you started with 108, 108 plus 108 is 216, 216 plus 108, and you keep going, it's perfectly aligned. If you were to change that to 107.47, it actually carries it. So it's not perfectly aligned, but it carries it to the next one. That's what he did. And because he can sing, he's a phenomenal singer. He knew this trick. He knew that if you can't hit a note, you go a little bit lower and it sounds like you carry it over. The problem with it is that any drones that he makes are going to be unstable because it's the same thing with music. It's not a perfect, stable kind of flow. And so therefore you can have a drone that's up there and it's going to crash out of nowhere because he cheated and kind of used this really cool trick, which there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not judging. It's a trick.
Yeah.
And that's
I
what
always
amazed
thought it was
people.
hokey that the drones that he was showing never were flying above like eye level,
Right. And it's because they're unstable and we don't want
Mhm.
unstable drones. And so therefore, yeah. But there's a lot of tricks like that do exist.
So back to your near-death experience, the downloads and have they ever revealed themselves or itself or anything when it said, it's you? Is it you just unlocked, you're finally, like you said, whole, or, you obviously had to have help to get there.
Right. So I think that everybody goes through this at some point in their life when they start kind of communicating with their higher self. So when you go on any kind of spiritual journey, one of the very first things is you learn to meditate, right? But you don't learn to meditate to sit in silence. You learn to meditate to receive something. So people will call it all different types of things. They'll name it. They'll, call it their higher self. They'll call it, Jesus, any of these characters, Buddha, right? Because the whole entire point is what we're really saying is we're saying that it is greater than a human, but not greater than God. So it's this in between space, that we're at. So for me, when I would meditate, I chose a biblical name or whatever, and it was Jacob. And so when I would meditate or if I would astral project, basically I would always be with this voice and also with this light being, which I've actually seen. that was called Jacob. But I also understand that's my higher self. It's just our way of kind of understanding a separation. Because, like I said, if you're on one side living on that side of the tree, there's another side that is happening at the exact same time. And it's only when you merge the two do you even understand that it's there.
Do you believe in, to that point, do you believe in past life regression?
That one is a little bit tough for me because I kind of have this belief that if you don't recognize yourself on the corner as the homeless person, you're never going to recognize yourself in a past life. I think that people get really hung up on, I was Alexander the Great, I was Cleopatra, when in reality, you were probably the person on the front line who died day one in a war.
Yeah.
The idea of not remembering your past lives is to protect you, not for you to go back and try to figure it out. You're not going to be able to understand anything traveling than you would revealing within yourself.
So
It's kind of the same thing of a journey.
you do believe in past lives.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've lived many lives.
Is that
Um,
the other side of the tree? So you say kind of thing, you
Both.
think? Okay.
It's actually both. So you have the option when you transition this life and you're in the 4D, you have more options than you have here. You can actually go back to a moment where you actually drew that line, which is why we call it a Y. At any point in time you see a Y now, you're going to think of this. It's literally go left, go right, or go behind. Right. So, and it's the same thing in quantum mechanics when you're looking at gates, left, right, behind. It's kind of that understanding. So you have the choice to go back to a key moment and actually see how it would have played out while still being within or behind the eyes of that character in essence. You also have a choice to start completely over. Then that's what birth is. That's that starting point of just scratch from the beginning, and going through that process. I think the part that scares people is they're afraid that the moment they die, that the idea of coming back 10 years later, right, it's not going to be better, it's going to be worse. But if you look at all of history, you'll realize it is better today than it was 300 years ago. And I know it's rough right now, and what we're seeing, but the reality is that it was better, it's better today than it was 432 years ago. So as long as you understand that you're the one who gets to choose, there is no trap. You're not forced to reincarnate. There is a whole moment where you actually choose to actually return back, whether you decide to choose again that moment that you could, draw the line, or the moment that you start completely fresh. Nobody is forced to be here.
Do we live that on like a collective consciousness scale, or is it all down to each one of us?
So think of it kind of like this. When you hear music, right? Every piece of the song has an individual note, right? Every single one of it. And together it sounds even better. But if you were to take that note and just separate it and study it and work with it and everything, it's just as powerful. So it's kind of like that understanding. Together, it absolutely makes a lot more harmony. But it doesn't mean that one singular person can't change a massive amount of things that are around them. And in fact, in all honesty, majority of people are unaware. And so one person who is aware rises above that. And the way that I teach that is imagine having a box, right? And everything inside that box is your life. Everything that you've ever experienced is inside that box. Now, 1% awareness is you standing on top of the box. You see the difference? You can literally see everything in that box, and you didn't go to 100%. You're not at Buddha's level, but you have 1% awareness over everything that's inside of it.
I've never thought. I like the music breakdown of that. How you said that, I like that a lot. Because it really is. A note sounds great, like Kenny G broke the world record holding one single note. But it's powerful.
E7's epic.
Yeah, right. I like that you put it that way. Um, do you? It's I know I keep coming back to it, and it sounds kind of like a repeating letter, or a repeating record. But with like the reincarnation and the choice to do this again, are like your guide, or I still don't know what to call what you what you saw, but
No problem.
are they like kind of a council or like a judgment?
Um,
Because
Not a judgment.
we all feel bad about things we've done in life, and
Right.
how do you let that sorrow or that embarrassment, or the time where you made a fool out of yourself at a party or something, is that judgment held there at that point, I guess, is my question.
So to answer this, you have to go back to what Nikola Tesla said as well, when he said that if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. I think that people don't understand what that actually means. Compassion, kindness, love, and trust are not wooey things. They are tangible, actual energy and keys that unlock doors. So, for instance, compassion is not something that you give to someone unless you believe that they actually need compassion. And the only reason that it unlocks something is because the person who's receiving it doesn't believe they deserve it. That's the definition of compassion. So when they talk about, for instance, let's go to the Bible, when they talk about hell, right? When people are talking about hell, they talk about burning. The only thing they never ask themselves is whether or not compassion burns. The completely different type versus the fire and damnation kind of thing. Compassion burns through your soul because it brings you back to that authentic you long before something skewed it up. So you're not actually judged. You don't need to be judged. And in fact, the more authentic you'd be in this world, the more you'd be able to move through things. So in your example, the moments that you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, say that to yourself. I shouldn't have done that. Next time I won't. Be authentic. It's the people that are constantly sitting there going, I shouldn't be thinking that. That's a bad thing. Oh, all you do is just waste energy. And make no mistake, when you started this life, you had a very certain set of energy. And every moment of your life, you either add to that energy or you take it away. That's why if you die too young, the first thing they say is, oh, you died too much energy, right? But if you live to 77, oh, he ran his energy out. He's done, he's good to go. So
Yep.
it's all about energy. And I wish that people, and we will, we're getting a lot closer. Science is going to start revealing a lot of these things, which is to understand that energy is not just metaphysical. It is very tangible. It is very real. Kindness is another one. The thing that people don't understand about kindness is kindness has one rule, and it's very simple. If you think you're being kind, but the person you're being kind to does not think you're being kind, breaks it. There's no kindness that is there whatsoever. Some guy
Okay.
standing on, corner saying, I need food, or I'm sorry, I need money, and you give him a sandwich, that's not kind. Yeah, I understand you think it's kind, but that'd be no different if you were asking for something and you got, something different. So it's that understanding that when you lock that in place, that's when abundance happens. That's when things show up in your life, or all of a sudden you're in flow. And I live that. I live that every single day. I financially am better than I ever would long before. And it is not because, I charge a fortune, I tilt in any way, shape, or form. It's not because, I have some kind of secret thing. It's that I understand how kindness works. And kindness is what literally gives you the things that you have in your life.
Has there been like a point that they want you to know? Was there a reason to all of this? Is what I'm asking, I guess.
So that's actually an interesting question because for a long time I thought that the point was to help people, right? Just to answer questions and work with people. And I started doing what's called breakthrough sessions. So after my NDE, I had this ability to be able to see energy. And what I mean by that is not auroras or anything like that. It's that I can have a conversation with you, and the moment you say a certain word, I actually see your energy release, which means you lied, right? You put energy to change the way it was going. And so I started working with people to be like, okay, let's just find out exactly, where you're lying to yourself so we can readjust it, and get to that place. And then it got to a place where it actually was about compassion because the time that we're about to move in, there is only one thing that is going to actually change the direction that we're going. We're at a pressure point. These are numerous times throughout history, we have pressure points. They happen every 432 years. And that's why I told you that 432 is exceptionally important. When you have five of them, you literally have at that point in time one zodiac. That zodiac holds all that energy. And then when you have all 12 of them, you have the totality of basically, we are not at the end yet. Okay, we're close because we're at the last zodiac in essence, but that's a long time. It's not what people think. It's not just next year is over, but we are at a pressure point. And so this pressure point is going to require compassion. It's going to require these keys that Nikola Tesla was trying to teach you about to actually change the trajectory. Because if not, we're going to redo World War II. We're gonna understand this very key message, which is that World War II, the most traumatic part was not that 11 million people died. The most traumatic part of World War II is that 11 million people had to die before the world agreed enough was enough. And so we're moving into that same thing, but it absolutely can change. It's just a question on whether or not we use these keys that we've been given.
Um, are you familiar? What you just said there aligns up with. Are you familiar with like the Galactic Federation and the Illuminati?
Yes.
Correlation and how we're kind of locked in where we're at as a gamble of like, nah, these, we're inherently bad and our energy is bad. And Jesus was more of a member of that federation who was like, no, I'll give them free will and they'll essentially be good, and
Yeah.
it kind of aligns with, oh, well, we're heading into that era now. And are we good or are we bad, And just curious if you ever hear of something like that, or think of something like that, or if that aligns with anything you've ever downloaded.
Yeah, so first, and again, this is one of the reasons why I chill back on this cartoon because some of the stuff I say, people just don't understand. First and foremost, the Illuminati is literally the illuminated. That's what it
Yep.
is. They actually started as the original keepers of the Bible. And then when the Bible couldn't answer things, when they couldn't find answers, when the church couldn't answer things, then they basically separated into science. And they basically believed that through applying more science to the side, they would illuminate. Well, of course, that was a problem for the church because the church was all about the metaphysical, not the actual physical. So I have the weirdest part to say is I've actually had some interaction, and it's not what people think that it is in terms of Illuminati. It is very very much kind of like a Vatican, but on the other side of science, in essence. And so there is no, humans are all bad or anything along those lines. It's more along the lines of understanding that this universe was designed very specifically. What I mean by that is I mean that fear has to exist and only exists in the 3D. And it's because of the fact that when you have a light spectrum, I'm pretty sure you might have seen some of these memes out there where they say things like, you can only see 10% of everything that's around you, all the
Yeah.
frequencies. Okay, so whenever fear compresses down on you, it actually makes it so you can't see as much. Same thing with hearing, same thing with tasting, same thing with touching. You cannot actually experience that whenever fear is condensing that down. So think about it like a song, right? Whenever you compress a song, you lose the quality of the song, but yet you make it small enough that you can actually interact with it and send it and email it. The same exact thing. So fear actually compresses the light spectrum so that you actually only interact with certain frequencies. The more that you release fear in your life, and everybody has fear from baby all the way up, the more that you release, the more you start to actually see the light spectrum. So when I said that humans that vibrated out of the human spectrum, that's exactly what I'm talking about. They released so much that they could see everything that was around you. And once you see, there's literally nothing else that stops you. At that point, it's belief. And so there is no judgment. There wouldn't be any kind of judgment from Jesus because Jesus isn't actually the man. Jesus is the example of how you can vibrate out of the light spectrum as the most recent character that we look at. Yes, Buddha was able to do it too, but that's a separation between two different places on the earth. So
Okay.
Jesus is that representation of where you can be when you start releasing that fear, when you start using these keys, and when you vibrate out of the spectrum you are actually in right now.
Do we, when that time comes, are we going to have from your downloads and your information, will we need help? Is that something that has to be guided through us?
In terms of, what do you mean?
Being able to be a good energy, I guess, in the easiest way
Oh,
to say that.
well, Earth is designed for that. So the thing is we take Earth so seriously. We think that Earth is the only part, the end of all ends. It's either hell or heaven at the end. Earth is a stepping stone, and it's designed specifically for you to have the other side so that you can appreciate and experience the side you actually want to. Now, you have a choice on Earth to have heaven or hell. You have a choice every single day on which way you're going to go. But if you decide to go the other way, there's no suffering for that. There's only the understanding of now you have a comparison to what you truly want, and now you can tangibly experience it in the 4D. So you can absolutely, that's why I said you can vibrate out of this while in this life, which is the example of Jesus. It's the example of Buddha. It's the example of Krishna, right? And there are many of them. Thoth, go all the way back, as far as you want to. There are many characters that were able to do it. So it's not so much that you need help. It's actually more along the lines of us as a collective need to start giving more steps because anybody who's had an NDE literally got this message of the understanding that death is not what we think it is. That is the common denominator in all NDEs. And yet about 5% of them will talk about hell. Why? because of the fact that they then allowed that fear to fill that space, and then you're right back to the beginning. So we don't need someone to show up. There is no one that can show up and save everybody, because if you think about it, in the grand scheme of things, everybody's doing the best they can given their view of the world, right? So it would be unfair to sit there and look at two different soldiers in a war and blame one side or the other, regardless of the situation. It's more along the lines of what we need is we need someone to stand between and say, let's understand these two sides and then move from that place.
I've always I've always told Matt this too, and everybody I know, you could ask any living person on this planet, nobody wants to go to war. It's
No,
a
Right.
it's a
couple,
man-made thing too.
yeah, it's a couple old people who have just been like, no, no, we got to handle it this way. And it's like, you ask anybody, nobody hates somebody to want to go to war with them.
Yeah, war is definitely a population control weapon. That's all that it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's happened all throughout history. And if you actually look, you'll be able to pick up on where crypto is going, right? So the original war started on land. Then they moved to the sea. Then they moved to the sky in World War II. Now we're moving to space. It's the same exact pattern, and it's not going to change. There's absolutely a war. I mean, there's a war that's happening right now. If you live in Israel, that's exactly,
Mm-hmm.
what you're experiencing. If you lived in Ukraine, and so, yeah, war is a tool that has been used, but let's be fair on this. So the Illuminati, this is a side that they understand. What they understand is they understand free will. If there is a person who gets to sit there and say, I'm going to have 5 kids, but I can't take care of, and I'm not talking about a girl, talking about guy or girl, doesn't matter. But if you can't take care of them and suddenly, we end up having to shift to kind of make up for that, and that affects the planet, that affects the land, that affects the water, that affects something, then there is somebody who needs to step in and say, the same way I talked about the watchers. If you even come close to affecting the sun, I guarantee you're about to see a shift you've never seen, because they will absolutely clear that space out. Because if you mess with the sun, then no one exists. It's not just, the few that want the right. It's absolutely nothing at that point in time.
Do so how do you feel about, let's fire off on a few craziness here. How do you feel about like Elon and singularity and the scary conspiracies about him and the end of the world?
So Elon Musk started as Elon Musk is an example of why they make Marvel movies. Okay. You start off as somebody who wants to change things, to do the best, and then you end up getting hurt. And what I mean by that is, I mean, if people would pay attention to the relationship between Elon Musk and his son, who also decided to transition, who also decided to write his father off, who also decided to do things behind his back and have nothing to do with him, we're paying, this whole society is paying for a hurt father and a son. And that's no different if you go all the way back to Moses and his brother, right? When Moses found out that he was Jew, he didn't want anything to do with that. But then the only person who was ever going to, be able to talk to his brother was Moses. If it had been anyone else, done and over, they would have, beheaded you or whatever it happened to be.
Yeah, they would have killed you.
So Elon Musk, what we're seeing is we're seeing that whenever we get hurt, we affect a few people, because that's where we are at this level. When somebody at that level, like Iron Man level, because that's what we're really talking about, is hurt, then you see that ripple effect affect far more. And that's all that you're seeing. If there was an actual bringing together of those two, father, son, father, daughter, whatever it is, direction, you would see a massive change. Why do you think they're going after trans so hard? No one cares. No one has, really cared. And yes, there needs to be a correction. Don't get me wrong. We can't jump so far that we can't keep up. But there was nothing wrong with the slow progression until it affected a billionaire's kid. And not just a billionaire's kid, the richest man in the world. We're not talking about, just an individual. So
Mm-hmm.
Elon Musk shifted and he became that character that you were rooting on in the beginning. And now they're going, you had it all, and, are about to burn the world to the ground in essence if it doesn't change.
It's wild
Thanos,
that
snap the
yes,
fingers.
exactly. It's wild you put it that way, because even in basic human nature, it's like, you could be around your friend who just lost his dog or whatever, and, it brings up that memory
Yep.
of like, oh, I had a dog that died, and now we see Elon Musk on TV with an entire nation, and
Yep.
he's got a trans kid, and he's also, I want to point this out, he's also fighting his child custody cases to keep them in Texas because they cap it at
Yes.
like $2,200, and he's a billionaire. That's how big
Yeah.
of a dirt, but it's on the national stage, and it makes, exactly like you said, it makes us all feel some type of way that we don't
Yep.
even really care to feel about.
Because if you go back and you actually go through X and you go through the tweets, you'd actually find out Tesla was one of the number one companies that actually allowed trans people to have their names without actually changing anything. He was supportive. You can go through and you'll see rainbows and all these different stuff. That dude got hurt, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And if you understand science, you'll understand that a star, whenever a star is at the end of its life, right, it has two options. It can collapse within itself and become a black hole, or it can naturally collapse and then it explodes and it becomes supernova and it gives every part of itself back out to space. So we have the ability to do the same because technically, yeah, I'm sure you've heard it before. We are stardust. We're made up of stardust. We are, an essence fusion. We're
Yep,
exactly
I
what
was
stars
literally
do.
thinking Ziggy Stardust in my head.
Yeah. So what you're watching is you're watching the making of a black hole. Science is going to figure out probably within the next year that we actually live inside of a black hole. So when I told you that E equals MC squared, what you'll remember from a black hole is that light cannot escape a black hole. Only something faster than the speed of light can escape a black hole. So now put love right back at that E that I was talking about in the beginning. E, love is faster than the speed of light squared. That is the only thing that is going to
Is your
change this
pupil a
direction.
black eye? I got to just thinking about that. I don't know why, but
My what?
are your pupils a black hole?
Oh, I don't
I
know.
wonder.
It's just a character.
Yeah. Oh no, just in general, right?
Just in general.
Yeah, like my
Oh, our
pupil.
eyes. Oh, I thought you meant I'm like looking at my character
Because
going, I guess it's
But
dark.
yeah,
they
yours
got
are huge on your guy. But yeah, that's kind of what brought it up, by the way. But
they
yeah.
got such a correlation to space. I feel like our eyes do. They show like black holes
Absolutely.
or galaxies and
And it
things.
absorbs every bit of light
Yeah.
that comes
Yeah.
at it, right?
Yeah. Our eyes are absolutely, what do they call it? Windows to the soul, that kind of thing. Windows to space, that kind of thing. Yeah. They are very much. And when you study the eye, it's fascinating. I mean, when you study color and understand that color doesn't exist, right? Frequencies exist. And then our brain, because we were taught, as kids, what this means, then our brains compartmentalize and make everything we see. In fact, everything in front of you is actually reversed. It's your eye that flips it and then allows you
And
to actually
makes
see
it
it
right
right
side
side.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. It's
It's
absolutely insane.
it's weird to think that. It's like,
Yeah.
are we upside down the whole time?
In essence, yes. And I think that's the problem that they run into with gravity. So gravity is not a pull, it's a push. Another thing that we're going to get closer and closer to understanding. And the reason is because it's very esoteric. If you believe that the world is happening to, if in other words, if you feel like things are being pulled towards you, then literally you feel like the world's happening to you, versus the reverse of if you have the ability to push back on a push, then you're happening to the world. It's the same thing if you wrap your hand around a door, right, and are going to open it, let's say the refrigerator, it is not the pull that it actually does it. It's the push of your fingers that pushes it towards you. So when we get rid of this idea that gravity is a pull, you'll start to see a major shift in science of that understanding that it's actually a push.
It's crazy. I'm kind of on the flat earth side that gravity is electrostatics. Like you could rub a balloon on your hair and it goes, and we're positive and we're protons and electrons. So I feel
Yeah.
like that's kind of holding us up or down in the world.
And that's, in terms of the thing. So it's the same thing. You're talking about something that's pushing against basically another source in essence. And so
Hmm.
that's what keeps you where you are. It's the same thing. So we just haven't defined yet what that push is. And once we do, then it'll all start to make a lot more sense.
You you said that at first you thought it was supposed to be like to help people. You had this happen to help people, and I feel like a lot of people in the world that go through something, their answer is exactly that, right? Oh, I think it was given to me to pass that on and help people, but now you understand that it's not that, and
Right.
you think like that would be for the majority of people, that like have something go through them, that they're maybe missing the point, and it's they think they're supposed to do something, so they're putting it all on themselves as opposed to the whole picture, kind of like as you're explaining.
Yes. I think that if you don't shift that energy, it becomes a savior complex, right? It's the same thing with if you ever met anyone who talks about who read Neville Goddard, and then they say something like, I'm God, right? Because that's what Neville teaches you. It gets you all to the place of realizing you and God are one, which is not the same thing as what Jesus was saying, which is the Father and I are one. He was still separating himself by claiming him as something else. But when you say that you and God are one, then what ends up happening is you look at the world and you don't understand why you don't have godlike power. Why are you not changing, the things the way they are? So it creates this very unhealthy cycle within your life. And it's the same thing with the savior complex. It's the exact same thing. You can take it to a smaller level. Empaths are a great example, right? This is something that people say all the time. I'm an empath. I was born an empath. My parents were empaths. But the reality is, if you don't embrace the fact that you chose to be an empath, then what ends up happening is you go into a Walmart and you feel like everybody's emotions are just slamming on you because you never got to choose this in the first place. Something as simple as saying to yourself, I'm choosing this, changes the whole entire trajectory of basically that energy. And so it
Abs-
removes that savior complex.
Absolutely. I mean, you put yourself in that one aspect where you're like, well, I should be able to control it. And then you're doubting yourself all of a sudden, because you're not controlling it, and it ruins everything that you were trying.
Exactly. It taints it, and no matter what you do from that point, then is a problem. It's the same thing with healers, right? You ever ask the question, people would say, like, I was born to be a healer. This is all that I know. This is what I am. Then you're literally sending out a signal to the universe that you hope that people stay sick. Because if for whatever reason you could snap your fingers and
Yeah.
everybody's healed, you don't know who you are anymore. You defined yourself by something, and therefore that's what you were sending out. So it's very subtle, but understanding energy is what really allows you to start to see all these things. And nine is tied to all of it. Just all of it is tied to that number nine.
It's crazy. It is. I mean, you go through the day, you don't even notice it. You wake up in the morning and you can go, oh man, I slept bad. And then you make your whole day about
Yep.
that, and you're sucking that negative energy, and everybody else around you. Oh yeah, I sleep like crap like that sometimes too, and then it's all
Yep.
and
Yeah. Or you
and
have
it is,
that
it's so
person in
subtle.
your life like that you avoid even because they're just so negative that you're just like, man, that like you get done talking to them and you're like exhausted, like
Yeah.
it's just yeah,
Yeah. If you haven't
Debbie
found a path
Downers.
to fill your cup, it gets emptied very, very quickly. And one of the things I started teaching students was the concept of filling your cup. So when you find something that actually fills your cup, you don't have to spend all this time working on your negativity. You don't have to clean out all the dirt, because as long as that natural water keeps flowing, the rest of it will rise to the top and remove itself naturally. You don't need to cut people off. You just need to find something that actually is refilling your cup and stick with that.
We're getting close on time here. Like you wanted, I want to though. What if you could say anything, like what you've learned from this and everybody else should know, because I don't ever want to have an NDE, and I don't think I ever will. Part of me thinks it would
Right.
be cool, at the same time, but like for the people that never will, or people who are lost or something, I feel like, you could say something.
Yeah. So, and I agree with that. I've had a lot of people that are like, I wish I had an NDE, and I'm like, yeah, 3 hours to convince me that I was not dead. It was traumatic. It wasn't this
Oh yeah,
peaceful,
back
ride.
back
Yeah.
on that. The
And you're good
three
on time, dude.
hours. Okay, cool. The 3 hours it took you, right, to get back into it. Did you ever feel like you wanted to go back? Like, wait, hold on. I wasn't finished there.
Yes, it was super traumatic. I did not want to be back. Everything I felt in that moment, like I said, filling up the cup, was just so profound. And so, yeah, it was really hard. Not hearing out of my ear was just, it was so weird. I'd never had that experience before. Not being able to calm down to just absolutely think that I'm dead, and this
Mm-hmm.
is some illusion, kind of thing, was very
Uh,
powerful.
yeah, I've had like moments in my life where they almost make you sick to your stomach of a feeling of like FOMO, missing out, and
Right,
or a girl you really really liked, doesn't even want to talk to you, or when you're
right,
young, you feel some type of way, and I feel like that would be one of the biggest things if I ever experienced like an out of body or a parallel universe, or I was abducted by aliens at some point, God forbid. I'd be like, dude, I have this FOMO of where I was,
right.
and
So,
you'd chase it.
yeah, I mean, just look at the crypto market. How many people have FOMO just,
Yeah,
with
like I
that?
could have like that guy who bought what like two
The
pizzas for
pizzas, yeah,
10 Bitcoin or 30 Bitcoin or something like that. Like, man.
right. 108,000 the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Spent a pizza.
they showed that was like a Pac-Man tournament or something back in the day for the Nintendo 64. Like, uh,
Oh, geez.
it was like first through fifth place got money, and like sixth place through
Oh
10th
yeah,
place
I saw
got
that.
10 Bitcoin or something. And it's like, oh, that sucked. And then now today you're like, whoa, I'm a millionaire.
Right. Yeah, no. I tell people all the time, you don't need to have an NDE. That is the whole entire point of me going through what I did and other people going through what they did. I don't need to have cancer to understand the moment that a doctor says, you got 6 months to live and I get to just be free at that point in time. I think that when it comes to things that I would like to say, first and foremost, there are two different energies in this universe. There's chaos and there's harmony. And chaos is required for you to actually appreciate harmony, right? So you have the choice, and I think this is important for today, that there is chaos all over right now. But you have the keys and the choice to not be affected by it because that's how it was designed here. It is not it's not a flip of a coin on whether or not you're affected by things. It's a flip of the mind. And that's truly what it is. There are so many people in World War II who are not affected in any way, shape, or form. There are so many people during COVID who are not affected in any way, shape, or form. And I'm not talking about just the ones who didn't get vaccinated or the ones who did. I'm talking about the ones who kept their vibration high enough that that stuff just didn't affect them, in any way, shape, or form. And so the more that you understand that chaos exists and harmony exists, and you choose which one you actually want, the more your life actually becomes that. So, in other words, if you're going to go on a spiritual journey and once a day you're going to say to yourself, I'm a good person, but 3,000 times in that day you're saying I'm a horrible person, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter, right? You got to flip that whole entire tide to where you have 3,000 positive thoughts and one negative thought where you actually feel the difference. Nines are exceptionally important because nines reveal harmony. 3, 6, and 9, 3 plus 6 is 9. And as I was showing you different numbers, throughout everything, if you want to live more aligned, you can follow a 3, 6, and 9 calendar. It's very simple. Add the month, the day, and the year until you get one singular digit. And then that digit is literally the day that you're on. So for instance, today would be, 1/23/2025. It's a 6. So today would end up being a 6. So you only have 1 through 9. There's never going to be a 10 because 1 plus 0 is going to be 1 again. There's never going to be a 12. 1 plus 2 would just be 3. So it's a great way to stay aligned as above, so below, with basically what's going on, above you, because everything that's above you is aligned with nines. Venus, 7,560 miles in diameter. Uranus, 31,860 miles. I memorized a lot of this stuff, but you know what I mean? It just keeps going and going where you have these alignments with nine. So I think that if you want to get unlost, basically, to start having a little bit, all you have to do is just change your life by 1%. Because here's my favorite part about this. Everything in this universe, you basically can kind of tie to the number 9. And the reason it's tied to the number 9 is because you, as the one, make it the completion of 10. You make it a new cycle. You make it a new journey, which is that one starting all over again. If you take any of the shapes, circle, 360 degrees, that's a 9. Right? Triangle, 180 degrees, that's a 9. Tetrahedron, 720 degrees, that's a 9. Dodecahedron, 6,480 degrees, that's a 9. Right? The cube, 2,160, which we talked about the moon, that's a 9. Right? If you take the octahedron, that's 1,440 degrees, which is the exact same amount of minutes in a day. I'm not making these up. That's exactly, what they are. And so when you start actually living aligned by 9 and start actually wanting to have that harmony, it starts revealing itself in your life. And it doesn't matter where you are, because I was in one very dark place when it basically happened to me. So you don't have to have an NDE. You just have to choose to start actually wanting to change your life by 1%. And 1% is all that's required. You change your life by 1%, the universe fills in 99.
You seem incredibly smart with numbers. What was your job before your NDE?
So that's actually the funniest part about this. And that's what makes my family and friends actually believe, is because, I told you who I was before. I actually got my GED because I wasn't very good in school. And on top of all of that, math was my worst. So I scored 72% of the nation on my GED, but I failed in math. So to have numbers show up, I was really frustrated. I was like, why? Why me? Out of all the people, are you going to give me these numbers? And I have a notebook when I woke up one time after a download where, like I said, it was 137649. Then it was 862350, which is actually the omega. And if you add that up, that's 24. And that number is actually found 24 times in pi. So, I mean, all these things. And if you add them up, 137,649, if you had a pen and paper, 137,649, and right below it, 862,350, line them up. They're all nines, right? 1 and 8, 9. I mean, three and six, 9. I mean, it's right there in front of you the whole time. So to answer your question, I actually was a graphic design artist. That's what I went to college for. And then I was IT. I'm very good with computers, but in terms of understanding these numbers or Pythagoras or a squared plus b squared, none of that. I had no understanding. I teach people now that actually have degrees in quantum mechanics because they just understand it. And I had nothing before that whatsoever.
Yeah, you speak on things that align a lot with like quantum physics and mechanics, and like
Like
the
even
Schrodinger's
psychology, you're
cat
touching on like
yeah, that's crazy.
Most
And
people I meet with, most students actually just want to learn.
do
A lot
you
of it is just tutoring.
do you think the downloads could be like taken from you if you weren't using them correctly, I guess? I know you say
I,
there's no judgment and things like that, but you ever get a
right.
feeling of something like that?
So I think that they can be what's the phrase I'm trying to think of? Shared basically with other people. If I decide to cut it off, right? It's being shared no matter what. If you look at all throughout history, whenever someone gets an idea, someone else across the world got the idea. Really just a question on who, solidified it first kind of thing.
Yep.
But I absolutely do believe that I can cut it off. It will never stop. It will constantly keep coming. It's me that can actually choose to cut it off. And in the last 3 years, it would be a lie to say that I haven't had moments where, a little fears come in areas, things that are happening, but I readjust, I reevaluate, and I use the compass of compassion, kindness, love, and trust. That is my compass. That's what I live by. And it kind of always takes me back to that center space.
It makes you feel aligned, essentially.
Yeah.
Like, do you think you've completely gotten rid of fear in your life because of that?
I don't think you ever actually get rid of all fear in your life, or you wouldn't be here. There'd be no reason. It's kind of the same thing with the ego. When you understand what the ego actually is, which is just the uniqueness of you. In other words, if you saw, I don't know if you have a girlfriend or not, but if you saw your partner as equal to you, that's an awkward bond, right? So the idea is that you have an ego so that it can separate you. And the problem is if you allow that to run amok, then you become so isolated because you say things like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest. And what does the universe do? Puts you in a box all by yourself. And now you're isolated and you are the best and you are the greatest, but there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing, to compare to at that point in time.
right.
So I don't believe that you ever actually officially get rid of fear. If you want to actually live this life, I have a girlfriend, I have a fiance. Sorry to make that clear, as this is, I have a fiance, and even though I went through everything that I went through, I can't force her, right? And so therefore, there's a little bit of fear there. What if, having a partner, things are a little bit different? And to be fair, throughout the years, that's been one of the biggest fears I had, and I've gotten a lot of clarity on how that actually works in relationships, because I think that what we think is if it's the 4D, then it's not real. And if it's not real, then, I can have whatever I want. But the reality is, it's very real. It's very tangible. They choose to be with you because they want to be with you. And anybody that doesn't want to be with someone in the 4D doesn't have to, doesn't need to in any way, shape, or form. So that free will still very much exists, no matter which side of the coin you're on.
Do you, couple more things here. Do
Yeah.
you think Mandela effects are a real thing?
Mandela effects are awesome. So first off, I run a group. I run a group called it started as started as the Mandela Effect group basically, and then it moved into Matrix Mysteries. It has 780,000 people. It's ridiculous how much people love the Mandela Effect. So I loved it in the very, very beginning because it was kind of like a crack in a reality. It opens the doors. It wasn't until later that I understood that's a gift from the aliens. So basically, it does exactly that. It cracks the reality, and the only way you're ever going to see your world as different is if there's a shift. So that is what the Mandela effect is. It's not CERN that did it. I know everybody loves the idea of smashing atoms together, changes everything, but the reality is, if we smashed atoms together and it just changed 15 movies, it's kind of weird. You know what I mean? Like there needs to be a little bit more there that
Yeah.
goes into that. So it actually, the reason that it's more technological, the reason it's more movies and logos and things like that is because That's what they worked with. They worked with the thing that we solidified in our brain and thought we remembered a certain way, and then they changed it just slightly. And the more that you learn about the double slit experiment, you'll understand this. The more you vibrate at a different frequency, the more you're going through the other door of the double slit, which
Yep.
means your reality is that. The people who are not vibrating at that didn't change their reality, and that's literally where they're at. And so that's why you're seeing this back and forth between the two. But it very much was a gift. I love it. I believe in it, and yeah.
So, okay, so yeah, the double slit is we observe protons when they don't think they're or atoms, right? When they don't think they're being
Photons.
observed. Yeah, protons.
Yeah.
They don't think we can see them. They're doing something completely different. But when we observe them, they're following a pattern, correct?
Yes. So
They're like
you
toddlers.
Yes.
yeah, it's your dogs, right? Is stop
Yep.
watching what your dog's doing and watch, how much they get into kind of thing.
Yep.
The most amazing thing I think about the double slit experiment is the understanding that it's a wave, right? That's the whole, interference pattern part. It's a wave. And then what's happening is inside of that wave, and we can't explain it yet because science just hasn't caught up. Inside that wave actually chooses to collapse every possibility that it could be and become a particle of light. And so when you look at the back wall, you'll see, if you're watching it, you'll only see either waves. In other words, they choose not to be seen whatsoever, or you'll see only particles, meaning that what you're observing is actually saying, hey, see me. And then it hits that. When you're not observing it, then you have waves, interference patterns, and particles, as if they're all over the place, just deciding whatever they want. So I think the coolest part is to understand that consciousness exists in photons of light. And once you understand that, then you understand things like I was talking about, like aerokinetics. It's not difficult. It's just the fact that you don't believe in it, you don't think it's real, so why would it connect to
Mhm.
you? Once you start expanding to that, then suddenly you'll start having connections in all different places. And it's not just aerokinetics. There's pyrokinetics, there's hydrokinetics, there's all these different elements that you can actually connect to.
Where does that put reality to you then? Like, is that
So I like
is that why everybody or lives a different reality essentially because the double slit experiment type, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the seven hermetic principles hit that spot on when the first one was everything is mental. That doesn't mean everything isn't real. It means everything can change, everything can adjust, and therefore what you perceive and what I perceive can be completely different and still be defined as, what is reality. And the really crazy part is that we've been doing this since history and we're not talking about it. When I ask you to visualize a boat in your mind, I guarantee you the two of you are going to visualize two completely different boats, right? And yet the reality is you visualized a boat. You can argue left and right, but yet it's a boat. Kind of the same
Matt's
thing.
visualizing a war destroyer.
How'd you
Guarantee.
know, dude?
Yeah. Soldier. You're a soldier.
That's awesome. Have you ever heard of constant velocity?
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of the exact same thing, right? The math and the science of constant velocity represents both sides. If I'm standing in space and you're standing in space, I can literally do the math and science to verify you're the one that's moving towards me. The same way that you could do the exact same math and science and it's me that's moving towards you. It allows for the understanding that reality is not what we think that it actually is.
Um, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm sure you've been asked this a bunch before. Do you think it's access to the Akashic records?
Oh, the Akashic records. Yeah, definitely. So from everything that I've understood thus far and working with different students is that the Akashic records are not what we think that it is because Akashic records are quantum. In other words, you can't read them. That's the whole point of them, is that they hold every state, every decision, everything in it. And the only thing that I have ever seen that is big enough is whatever it is you define as greater than humanity. So in other words, God, that those terms that we were using, the source, whatever it happens to be, it has the ability to basically, it isn't going to say you're going to do this because it's predetermined. It's going to say you're going to do this because it's one of 55 billion options of what you're going to do, right? So think about like a video game, right? The person who designs the video game knows everything inside that video game. There's not a person who's going to play that video game and find some hidden door that wasn't actually created for you to go through, right? It's the same exact thing. But the person who designed the video game does not know whether or not you're going to play Mario or Luigi, whether or not you're going to go all the way through the whole entire thing, or you're just going to fall off the cliff or fall in the hole, every single time you do it. And that's kind of the same thing with God. It has the totality of everything, but it doesn't actually pick and choose what you're going to do or tell you what you're going to do because that takes away free will. So the Akashic records are quantum. And so when people say that they've gone to the Akashic record, what they're really saying is they're saying that they have collapsed a wave function, which is what we were talking about, to a particle of light. And that particle of light revealed something. And that's what we're talking about. But in terms of the whole entire record, it is unseeable. It's a wave. And so that's why I say the way that I visualize it, as I was given these books, these particles of light, and then each time that I, remember them, dive into them, or study on them, all of a sudden it starts making more sense and more sense.
I don't like the idea of the Akashic records. I think it completely takes away from uniqueness and our ability to learn, like you're saying, and grow and move into the next step. If everything's already predetermined and written down and
Right.
every moment is there, what truly am I? Other
Yeah,
than words in a
predeterminism
book.
takes away the joy of life, in essence.
Absolutely. It's like, ooh, I'm working towards this and I'm feeling great about it. And it's like, well, the Akashic record said you're never going to get there. It's like, well, dang. I don't like that. I don't like that at all.
I think that they're a tool, in all honesty. I think they're a tool to light a fire.
Okay.
If you think about it, we were talking about stars and stardust. You're made of carbon. That's the whole secret behind 666. It's not a hidden, evil thing or anything. There's 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons in carbon. You're made of carbon. If you end up heating you up, you literally, and you add pressure to you, you can become a diamond. If you end up just lighting you up with fire, you just light like coal, in essence, right? You just keep burning and burning and you waste photons, which are illusions that basically are being released. So, I mean, it's the exact same thing. I think they use it as a tool that basically, like you just said, if someone tells you you can't do something, that puts a fire under you to actually be able to do it, but has nothing to do with whether or not it was written.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I want to say, dude, you're awesome. The things you brought today, right? It's such a, like, I want to say positive outlook on life, but that's really cliche. It's not so much a positive outlook on life as it's more of like you understand you control your destiny almost, like I try to always tell people, they're like, oh man, it's just been hard lately and life sucks and all this stuff. And I'm like, dude, you're the one who wakes up and chooses to be sad about that,
Right.
And I feel like that's a better way to explain how I feel about the way you speak. You really get that in a picture and you understand that there's something bigger than that, but you're still in control of it.
Right. Yeah. That you're the co-creator of everything. And the reason I say co-creator, because I think it's important for you to realize that there has to be something greater than yourself that's attached. Like it just does not work if not. Like I said, you'll look at the world and you'll become disillusioned, with the fact that you can't change it. There are horrible things every day. I also love the message of 1% because I feel like everybody can do it. It's not just a 1% the way I taught it. It's also same with giving. You ever hear people that are like, I give and give and give. I give everything, but I don't have any abundance, anything come back because you missed the message. You were only supposed to give 1% past your comfort level. Everybody has a comfort level. If you got $10 in your pocket, 50 cents, maybe your comfort level, then give 51. That's all that you need to do because this universe works on a gear. And that's how energy works. And so when you actually turn the gear, that's how things come to you. If you decide to do nothing whatsoever, the gear doesn't turn and nothing actually happens. But you were never meant to turn the whole 99. You're only meant to give that 1%. And that's in spirituality, that's in authenticity, that's in giving, that's in healing, right? I teach people to charge their water, and I can tell you all different stories of people, whether they have pacemakers that shock them or rare blood diseases where their doctors are going, I don't have a clue what's changing. And the only thing they change is charging their water. Because the understanding of charging water is the same thing as tapping into the 9. You only use frequencies that align with 3, 6, and 9.
I can tell you after this conversation, I'm definitely waiting till January 26th to upload this episode. So it's a 9.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to follow these things now. I think it's really cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. Do you think there are like other types of UFOs visiting people, or you had that voice in you? Is there more than that? Are there people who can just alien abductions or cryptids out there? When people think they see like a skinwalker or a djinn or something.
Right. Definitely diving into it. So I wish that people understood how powerful the government is, and what I mean by that is I don't mean just the government. I mean technology. We've advanced so far in technology. What you have right now is preschool. in essence of where they are. And I can go a step further to say that that includes faith, right? So in other words, there is a machine that exists that can read whether you have faith or not. It's very simple. If you think you have to do something for what you're claiming you have faith in, you don't have faith, and therefore you trigger off a mark kind of thing.
Okay.
If you literally believe that whatever it is you believe in is big enough to handle it itself, you're like the wave. You don't show up in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so that would be an example. So when it comes to, first off, there are animals that we have not discovered. There are animals that different vibrations reveal, right? But if it's the first time you see it, it just scares you. There's no understanding. Imagine the first person who saw a bear, long before we had an understanding what a bear was. Imagine the first person who heard a bear. If you've ever heard a bear, they're terrifying. I mean, it's just, it sounds like the ground is just moving underneath you. So imagine how they would have written about that and talked about that. So there are many animals that we have not discovered yet, and we will continue as we change our vibration. As Earth changes its vibration, it starts revealing different things that have always been around. They just weren't affected. And that's a good thing because we have been making a lot of mistakes for a long time. In terms of things like alien abductions, I will say, I don't like to say 100% on anything. I will say 99% of alien abductions were government. Absolutely. They understood they needed to use technology and test technology. And you've seen this in psychology all throughout history, right? Where they've pulled people, put them in asylums, tested things out and whatnot. And so it's terrifying for them. They have no understanding of what's going on. They're using technology they've never seen before, but it is not aliens the way that we think, because outside of Earth, there is nothing outside of Earth that actually wants to affect Earth. Earth is it's just a waste in essence at this point in time. There is no reason to even connect to Earth until we change the frequency vibration to purple, which is ultraviolet, which is why we are getting closer with 5G, which is ultraviolet, right?
Okay.
It's all connected in this way. And when we send out that signal, now you're going to start to see different species, not aliens. That's different. You're going to start to see different species because of the fact that they understand all this stuff. This is, like I said, preschool compared to college, right? You would never go back to school just to make kids' lives a living hell, right? It's the same exact thing. There's no reason to whatsoever, but you
Matt
have to
might.
show first that you're there. And by the way, I know you're military, and I don't mean to, insult in
No,
any way, shape, or
no.
form. Just,
He's a conspiracy theorist of the military. It's
gotcha.
yeah, yeah. A little bit of credence too for everybody listening out what they're saying. An article even came out 2 days ago on Tuesday from CNN, Yahoo News, whatever you want, you could look it up, that the Earth's north magnetic pole has moved,
Yes.
like a good 20 degrees now. So stuff is shifting.
Yeah. Casey talked about that. If you've ever studied Edgar Casey, he was the one who was really talking about these pole shifts and this understanding. And the same thing with the sun. Every 22 years, the sun actually does a flip. And so that affects things. And that's why we have to change our technology, because think about it this way. The sun affects everything that vibrates, right? So I'm going to disillusion some people right now. The closer you get to the sun with a rocket that you built on Earth, the vibration of those atoms stay at that point. Once you break out of a certain point, the vibration of the atoms pick up, which means that whatever you built literally becomes almost transparent, which means we're not getting that far in terms of what people think. The moon is still within the atmosphere of where that's okay. There's actually a very large atmosphere. Mars is within this atmosphere of where that's okay. But as you start moving further away, the things that we build, and that's the reason that Mars is so difficult right now. That's why Elon Musk is trying as hard as he can. The math and the science that we use down here is not upheld in space,
I've always
right?
said that. I'm like, how
Yeah,
how are we going to say, oh, well, we know this and we know that? Dude, we never been there. We don't know that
no
math
clue.
is the
Yeah,
same. Yeah.
exactly. But aliens have been helping and have been giving information, and that's how science starts to shift and change and technology changes. The eclipse that you just had, April 8th, right? Directly connected to August 21st, 2017 eclipse. Makes this kind of weird, but my birthday is actually August 21st. And so that's how I noticed the eclipse. And that's how I noticed the one that was on April 8th and how they were connected. I did a whole, post on this. But basically, the reason they sent out I think it was 4 or 3 rockets into this eclipse is because we figured something out. We figured out that the path of totality that goes across Earth is actually a way for a massive computer to track where Earth actually is in one of these cosmic cycles. Because think about
Whoa.
it, the ground would be colder than everything on each side of it, right? And there's only a certain amount of it because it's shadowed out. So it's like a massive computer that can pick up exactly where we are in the cosmos based off of eclipses. And that's why the Saros cycle, which is basically a cycle of eclipses, if you look at Hebrew gematria, is 666. It's this whole understanding of there's a lot more than what we really think is going on.
I always thought the rockets on that first eclipse were fish, or the second eclipse were fishy, because they were like, well, we're trying to figure this out. And then they never shot them into any other eclipses. And I'm like, well, if you're trying to
Right.
figure it out, why aren't you constantly doing it?
Yeah,
So,
it's because they figured this out. There is a cosmic computer of energy, because that's where AI comes from. The reality is people have no understanding of what AI is or what it's capable of doing, and we could talk about that for hours, but the whole entire point is that during that eclipse, we were given a gift. What we were given is we were given another frequency, right? Think about whenever the star exploded went supernova and we got ultraviolet. We didn't even know ultraviolet existed. We didn't know that X-ray or any of those things existed until we actually saw it in the cosmos. And then we were like, oh, there's a frequency. Let's mess with it. Let's do the math. Let's do the science, and let's see what we can do with this frequency. So we were given a gift, in essence, on that eclipse. And that's what they were basically tracking. And they realized that the information in that gift was to say that the sun is a cosmic computer. It is a fusion running computer. And so that's why the path to totality is so important, because it's the coolest part of the earth. And people would say something like, yeah, but there's all these other places on earth that are cool. Yes. But if you have all the information, you realize that right outside that path of totality will be warmer, literally right outside of it. And so you can actually track exactly where it's at.
that is awesome. That is awesome. And that's a whole nother way to think about it too, right? Yeah, I mean, you're open. You're way
Mhm.
more open on the mind. Well, man, we went a little bit longer than I know we said we would. And I want to
No
thank you
problem.
for coming on. And I'm going to stay in touch with you, dude, because you are awesome. This was one of the coolest conversations I think I had on here. So thank you for that.
Thank you, because I actually really enjoyed this. Normally, people just talk about the NDE,
Nah,
and there's so much more, and I
oh,
don't ever get to really talk about it. So this was
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah,
I'd sit here and pick your
we
brain
want the
all
whole thing.
day.
Yes. Yeah, what time is it? 4 o'clock? Let's go till 10. Who cares? No. Just kidding. So, Matt, you have anything you want to say to him?
I mean, just thank you. That was very enlightening. Like, I feel like I learned a lot from, like, that's why I had to ask you your age. Like, you just seemed like way wiser than your years by far.
It's cool,
Thank
man.
you. I appreciate it.
Um, anyway, thanks for being on the show. We are the end of days best friends. And it's not that anything's coming to the end. We just, got a lot of questions about it. I'm your
Right.
boy Michael,
And I'm Matt.
and that was Devin hooking it up, folks. Y'all enjoy. Till the next one.